Hi, I'm John, WL7M. Recently on the Straight Key Century Club discussion group, a gentleman posted about having trouble using a straight key because of carpal tunnel syndrome. And several other hams joined in who were also having problems, whether it was wrist injuries or arthritis. They just couldn't use a straight key for very long. After reading that, I remembered an article in QST magazine from several years ago about something called a puff and sip keyer. What does puff and sip mean? Well, basically, a puff and sip switch is a pair of pressure activated mechanical switches that are operated through a plastic tube. And it allows you to close the contacts by either puffing or sipping, blowing or sucking on the tube. It's a type of switch that's normally used for adaptive technology for disabled people, for example, to control an electric wheelchair. So I went back into the QST archives and I found the original article from March of 2004 by Gary Gordon, K6KV. Gary's design used a couple of pressure activated mechanical switches, one that closed the contacts with a positive pressure and the other that closes contacts with the negative pressure. And they were connected together through an X connector to a longer tube. So by blowing and sucking or puffing and sipping on the tube, you could close the contacts on either switch and operate them just like a paddle connected to an electronic keyer. That's a great design, but I was wondering, could we use that same technology to build a straight key? So to experiment, I went on eBay and I found several people that were selling these mechanical pressure switches from World Magnetics. The switch is essentially a plastic casing with a diaphragm inside and a couple of gold contacts. And there are several versions of this switch, and I'll have a link below to the World Magnetics website and also some description of the switch I bought and some other switches I think might work. This particular version has a high pressure port and a low pressure port. And you can use either port to close the switch. But in our case, we're only going to use the high pressure port because we're building essentially what is a puff key. By exerting a positive pressure, we close the contacts. Also on the switch, the electrical contacts are provided through a couple of blade contacts, the blade connectors. And there's also a small port with a adjustment screw so you can adjust the sensitivity or the point at which the switch closes. Different versions of this switch work with different pressure ranges. So I'm going to connect the electrical side of this switch to a code practice oscillator. This one's a kit from Morse Technologies. And then originally when I started playing with this, I thought I could just connect the tube to the positive side and activate the switch. But that didn't work. And I don't know why. Something about the pressures aren't right. But I experimented some more. And what I came up with was this arrangement with a T connector. So I can connect the longer puff tube to this side of the T. Like that. It's a tight fit. And so when I'm blowing on this tube, most of the air is just flowing through and coming out straight through the T on the other side of this tube. And then there's a smaller side tube where the pressure is generated to operate the switch. And it turns out that the amount of pressure on this side tube is just perfect to activate the pressure switch. An added benefit of this arrangement that I didn't realize is when you're blowing your hot, moist breath into a plastic tube, you're going to get condensation. And this straight through line here kept all the condensation in this portion of the tube. And so far, I have not seen any condensation in the side tube that's connected to the switch. So hopefully this will keep the moisture from entering the switch. All right, let's try it out. I'm going to turn on the oscillator. Now you notice when I'm blowing into this, I don't have my lips locked around the tube. You can do that and it still works, but I found that by letting a little air escape, it gives me more control and also allows me to breathe. So in other words, I'm exhaling as I'm blowing. And then I can pause in between words and inhale. Sort of like playing a brass instrument, trumpet or French horn. All right, let's try calling CQ. So you can see how I was inhaling in between words occasionally to keep the breath going. And interesting though, I found with this pressure sensitive puff switch that I am able to send code faster and more accurately than I can with a straight key. So there it is, the puff key. Hope you enjoyed the video.